Welcome to the Supreme Court Podcast.
Ang SPGI sa simpleng bagay ay para magtayo na isang gusali o kahit bahay. Kailangan palawakin, dagdagan, magkaroon ng adjustment. Dagdagan ng pinto, dagdagan ng bintana, lakihan ng kwarto. So pinag-aralan namin mabuti yan. Kumuha kami ng mga eksperto para buuin ang SPGI. Efficiency para mapabilis ang mga proseso. Innovation, gagamit tayo ng mga bagong teknolohiya para mapabilis ang proseso. Access, para ang lahat ng mamamayang Pilipino ay magkaroon ng pagkakataong makatugon ang kailangan nila sa judikatura. Lahat, walang distinction, will have access to justice. Sabi nga, through the SPGI, I envision a justice system that truly works for the ordinary Filipino. One that is easier, faster, and more accessible.
In October 2022, the Supreme Court formally launched the Strategic Plan for Judicial Innovations 2022 to 2027, or SPJI. It was envisioned to be a long-term reform program, a blueprint for action for the Supreme Court under the leadership of Chief Justice Alexander G. Gesmundo. 3 years on, what has happened to the plans laid out in SPJI? Are the lofty goals slowly being achieved? Is the vision closer to becoming a reality? Hi, I'm Attorney Mike Navalio, Supreme Court Chief Communications Officer. It's the 7th of November 2025, and today we present to you a special episode of our Supreme Court PH podcast. For one episode, this podcast will also be on video, and we will feature a conversation with 9 of our sitting justices as they discuss 14 transformative projects under SPJI during the 3rd SPJI anniversary event at the Manila Hotel on October 22, 2025. The discussion will be broken down into 3 parts. After a brief introduction, justices will speak about where their projects are at and what's next for the coming year.
The Fiscal Autonomy Act, signed into law on August 14, 2025, authorizes the Supreme Court to submit its original budget proposal directly to Congress, ensuring that the judiciary's budget will not be reduced below the previous year's allocation and will be released automatically. This landmark reform lays the groundwork for genuine financial independence and more effective resource management. To protect its people, the judiciary established the Office of the Judiciary Marshals. With the implementing rules and regulations issued in November 2024 and the appointment of its first Chief Marshal in March 2025, the judiciary now has a dedicated security service that strengthens independence and ensures safer courts for all. Modernizing the Office of the Court Administrator also became essential. Through consultations, summits, and town hall meetings, reforms were approved in July 2025 to build a more agile institution that reinforces oversight and strengthens the capacity of court personnel. And through ongoing inspections and consultations, the judiciary continues to enhance halls of justice nationwide, ensuring that the places where justice is served truly reflect its dignity and purpose. Through these reforms, the judiciary has fortified its foundations of protecting its people, modernizing its systems, and ensuring that justice is delivered in spaces worthy of the confidence of the Filipino people.
Chief Justice, 3 years after we launched the Strategic Plan for Judicial Innovations, what are your thoughts about where we are now and what's next for us in the coming years?
We have achieved a lot over the last years that we have been implementing the SPJI. As I will mention earlier in my main message what we have achieved so far, but what are very clear are the digitization efforts of the court to the e-court justice system. And a significant achievement is the Judicial Fiscal Autonomy Act, which should have been passed 37 years ago when the new constitution took effect, but fortunately passed and became a law last this year. And then, of course, the strengthening of the cooperation between other government agencies involved in the administration of justice, such as the Justice Coordinating Council, We have now at the moment 16 justice zones, and 3 more justice zones are coming, of course with the support of the European Union.
Thank you, Chief. And you mentioned the Judiciary Fiscal Autonomy Act, and many people are probably wondering, what does this mean? If the Supreme Court or the judiciary is given autonomy to deal with its finances, what does it mean for us, for litigants, for court users, and even court personnel? And to answer this, may I pose the question to Associate Justice Jose Maidas P. Marquez, who is the chairperson of the Supreme Court TWG, to draft the IRR of the Judiciary Fiscal Autonomy Act. Justice Maidas.
Well, the Judiciary Fiscal Autonomy Act actually guarantees the independence of the third co-equal branch of government, the judiciary. As we in the judiciary no longer have to go through the executive department for our budget. It used to be that we go through the DBM, which is part of the executive department. But with the Judiciary Fiscal Autonomy Act, we create our own budget and we directly submit this budget to Congress, which is mandated under the Constitution to allocate the resources of the state. So that's one major development for the court. And of course, since the budget process for 2026 is already almost completed, we will start invoking this act or this law for next year, 2026, for budget year 2027. Yeah, the law already took effect last September 1, so we can now actually cite and invoke self-implementing provisions of the law. However, the law also says that we have to have that IRR, or the implementing rules and regulations, which we have to come up with within 6 months. So that is what we are doing now. The court has already created a technical working group to draft the IRR, and this is in coordination with the Department of Budget and the Commission on Audit. So that is where we are right now, and we hope to be able to invoke and cite this law to its fullest extent so that our independence will truly be ensured and guaranteed.
Thank you, Justice. And one other piece of legislation that is considered landmark for the judiciary is the Judiciary Marshals Act. It took a while before this law was passed. And so we talked to the chair of the TWG who is drafting the IRR, the Committee on Security, Justice Rodil Salameda. What are we expecting and what does this mean when we have our own office taking care of our own security? Does this mean better security for our judges and justices and even the premises of our courts? Justice Alameda.
There was a time when there was about 34 killings of judges in the past, but only 2 were resolved by the police. So there was a clamor to establish a security group to focus on the security and safety of the judges. And because of this, the Judiciary Marshals came about. Now, the Judiciary Marshal was created by RA number 11691. I just want to clarify that this is not the private army of the Chief Justice. It's really primarily responsible for the security, safety, protection of the members and officials, personnel, and property of the judiciary, including the integrity of the courts and the proceedings. Now, the SPJI acknowledges the safety and security of the judiciary as a vital part of maintaining judicial independence and effective court proceedings. Right now, we have already finished with the Judiciary Marshals rules and regulations, and in fact, it was approved by the NBank on August 20, 2024. So also, we have also appointed the Judiciary Marshals for Luzon, Deputy Marshals for Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and our Chief Marshal. We have retired Brigadier General Manuel Gaerlan as the Chief Marshal of the Judiciary. We have retired Major General Joel Napoleon Coronel. for Deputy Marshal for Luzon, we have retired Colonel Randy Oremonte, Deputy Marshal for the Visayas, and last but not the least, former officer in charge of the Office of the Director of the NBI, Attorney Eric B. Distor, Deputy Marshal for Mindanao. Since assuming their roles as top officials of the OJM, they have actively engaged in significant meetings with U.S. Department of Justice and Australian counterparts. We would like to emphasize that our judiciary marshals are unique considering that they are not under the executive branch. They are solely under the judiciary. This is unique. I think this is the first time in the world. Right now, we are in the process of organizing and appointing various positions on the judiciary marshals. The goal is to establish its presence not only in the NCR, but in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao through the establishment of regional and satellite offices in the province and in the regions and highly urbanized cities through the appointment of regional, provincial, and city marshals. Similarly, OJM will soon activate its line units to bolster its operational, investigative, intelligence, cybersecurity capability. And lastly, another key component of the Judiciary Marshal is to establish a Judiciary Marshals Academy that is responsible for the training and development of all members of the OJM, especially with the help of our stakeholders present right now. So the Judiciary Marshals is not purely the marshals of the judiciary, the Supreme Court. It is really the marshals of the people.
Thank you, Justice Rodil. Of course, when you talk about securing the court personnel, we also talk about the physical integrity of the courthouses themselves. And we will ask Associate Justice Ramon Paul Hernando, who is the chairperson of the Oversight Committee over the General Maintenance of the Philippine Halls of Justice, what the judiciary's plans are in terms of safeguarding the courthouses, especially in light of recent earthquakes that took place in the country. Justice Mon?
Thank you, Mike. The court created two very vital committees relating to the halls of justice. First is the Committee on Halls of Justice, which is chaired by Justice Ben Kagiwa, and the other is the Oversight Committee for the General Maintenance of HOJs, which I chair. The two of us, Justice Ben and I, have a general roadmap which is geared towards the construction, maintenance, and rehabilitation of courts all over the country. And these are hundreds of courts spread across the Philippines. We identified two urgent actions. First is urgent, and this would relate to the rehabilitation and reconstruction, retrofitting of halls of justice that we have seen to be non-compliant with standards of safety for our court employees. And for the long term, we have a plan of engaging with private entities through the PPP, public-private partnerships, so that we can come up with halls of justice that are really going to be true halls of justice, as would befit the judiciary. Particularly, we are prioritizing the repair of courts that we have seen are needing of repairs. Maniwala kayo, may mga courts of justice na may mga ahas, no? A cobra. We actually came across one in Tarlac City. But luckily for the courts in Tarlac City, there is now an ongoing construction of I think is going to be a very good model HOJ in Tarlac City. The court has spent for its part almost 200 million for its construction, and the LGU province of Tarlac and the city of Tarlac will eventually shoulder the remaining costs for the completion of the HOJ there. And just recently, we all know what happened in Cebu and also in Davao. My committee went to Cebu City and we saw for ourselves what happened to the HOJ in Cebu City. We need to relocate all of our court personnel, including the judges, to another safe place in Cebu City. We're now doing that with Court Administrator Justice Tay Estuesta. She has identified possible relocation sites for our court personnel in Cebu City. And also in Davao and Surigao del Sur, which were also hit by earthquakes recently, our RCM there has been very active. She has been in touch with Justice Tay, our court administrator, who has submitted to the Court and Bank the pertinent reports on what has happened there in Davao, in Surigao, in Cebu, also in Rojas, which has been identified as a court of justice that needs to be relocated because it was also hit hard by the earthquake. We are maintaining our plan of doing a comprehensive structural assessment of all our courts, as many as we can, however hard it is. Because as you know, physical inspection of courts can be very, very difficult because of, well, the geographical situation of our country, which, as you know, our courts are spread all over our islands. And we continue to do regular monitoring through physical inspections and virtual meetings with court personnel, particularly with the RCM. Now that we have the RCM, we feel that we'll have better connections with people on the ground, with court personnel, so that they can immediately escalate to us, to the bank, their needs in regard to their HOJs. And we are identifying also courts that need to comply with accessibility laws, yung mga PWD accessible features, including ramps, elevators, accessible toilets, and the like. For the long term, and I mentioned this earlier, together with Justice Ben, we plan to engage through PPP, private enterprises, for the construction of much better HOJs for our, not just for our court personnel, but also for the public that we serve. And we have identified about 71 of these courts, 71 major courts, and we are hopeful that as early as 2027, we can begin with the construction already of these identified HOJs. And lastly, CGA knows fully about this. We're coming up with an eHOJ, which will contain a general database of our courts nationwide. This will help us in digitizing the conditions of all our HOJs nationwide for a much better monitoring.
Thank you, Justice Mon. Thank you, Justice Mon. And Justice Mon mentioned regional court managers. For those who may not be familiar, what are regional court managers? We're happy to report that we now have regional court managers for every judicial region in the country. And to talk more about this is the former court administrator himself, now Associate Justice Villanueva, Raul Villanueva, who was part of the Oversight Committee on OCA modernization. Justice Raul?
First, let me, of course, mention that the SPJI, or the Strategic Plan for Judicial Innovations, has three major core objectives on efficiency, innovation, and access. And the modernization of the Office of the Court Administrator is actually under the objective on efficiency, particularly to streamline its operations and its processes. So the OCA modernization actually started with the establishment of the offices of the regional court managers, pursuant to the resolution issued by the court last February 2024. And we started with 6 pilot courts pilot ORCMs in 6 different regions in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And now we have completed already the establishment of the additional 9 offices of the regional court managers. So we have completed already the establishment of these offices, which are intended to devolve the functions of the Office of the Court Administrator Central to the region, so that the services of the OCA can better reach, and can be better reached by our judges and court personnel. And after 1 year and 8 months, we are now reaping the benefits of the ORCMs, with, of course, our judges and court personnel very much familiar already with the, of course, the existence of these very vital offices. And likewise, this has enabled many of the administrative, financial, and halls of justice concerns of our judges and court personnel being, of course, coursed through these offices. And to boost this creation of the offices of the regional court managers, and as well, of course, in the effort to modernize the office of the court administrator, we have a new, as mentioned earlier and shown in the video, we have a new court administrator, of course, in the person of Justice Estuesta, and together with, of course, a new court administrator, the functions of our 3 deputy court administrators are now evolving. Instead of being assigned geographical assignments or work, they are now given functional tasks. There is now a deputy court administrator for operations. There is now another deputy court administrator for administration, and another deputy court administrator for regional services. Within the next few months, let me just mention before finishing my reply to your question, Attorney Mike, we expect a new OCA staffing pattern, a lean and mean organizational structure involving, of course, the 5 key offices of the Office of the Court Administrator, particularly the Office of the Administrative Services, the Financial Management Office, the Court Management Office, the Legal Office, and the Office on Halls of Justice. Likewise, we expect the devolution of management information systems and, of course, other procedures that are digitalized through the ORCMs, and the repurpose court management office that is capacitated, of course, to provide valuable data on court management, policy development, and strategic planning. And finally, with respect to procurement, this will be properly managed, and we expect that this will be enhanced and, of course, given or turned over, some procurements turned over to our ORCMs. So as these are all happening, of course, may I just mention that the Office of the Court Administrator is marking its 50th year anniversary by November 18, 2025. This is not just a moment to celebrate, but a milestone year that signals a new era for the Office of the Court Administrator to have a modernized organization that is strategically innovating for court administration at its best and finest to better serve, of course, the judges and court personnel nationwide.
From Pot Chavez of Manila Standard, how can we measure the innovations or developments introduced by the SPJI every year until 2027? And over the years, since its introduction in 2022, how would you rate the success of SPJI and its programs? Were there suggestions raised by its stakeholders to further improve the programs?
We track the objectives, which are formulated in a smart way: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound. So there is a project development office that is actually tracking all the achievements of the SPJI. As soon as they are installed, There will be evaluative rubrics also to continue checking on its impact in terms of efficiency, innovation, and also access to justice. So that is how we track the developments.
Well, one thing that would prove that our innovations are working within our system is the fact that, the Supreme Court has been recognized for the last 3 years as one of the best employers in the country, so that our own people recognizes the changes that are happening in the judiciary that improves their workplace, their work performance. So that should be one indicator that we are doing something effectively and efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice Sismundo. That concludes our discussion on Judiciary Fiscal Autonomy Act, Office of the Judiciary Marshals, OCA Modernization, and Halls of Justice. We proceed to our next segment.
Apart from setting the foundations, the judiciary also turned to innovation, where it harnessed technology and new approaches to make justice faster, more responsive, and more inclusive. Through eCourt PH, a unified and intelligent case management system, all levels of the judiciary are now being connected, from trial courts to the Supreme Court. The system went live at the Supreme Court on July 1, 2025, and has since processed over 1,000 new case filings. Its rollout to lower and tertiary courts is underway, bringing the judiciary closer to a fully digital, paperless system by 2026. Innovation also means improving how courts perform. The High Performance Courts Initiative identifies delays, promotes best practices, and pilots efficiency models in first-level courts, turning every court into a model of timely and effective justice. To make justice more inclusive, the judiciary introduced the use of Filipino Sign Language in courts, ensuring that persons with disabilities can fully participate in legal proceedings. The SCPH podcast brings judicial reforms and landmark decisions directly to the public, engaging audiences nationwide through accessible digital platforms. And through the Unified Legal Aid Service, or ULAS, the judiciary expands access to free legal assistance for the poor and marginalized, requiring lawyers to dedicate hours of pro bono service to those in need. Innovation, after all, is not just about technology. It is about breaking barriers and finding new ways to serve the Filipino people.
And let me begin with the Senior Associate Justice Marvic Leon. And as you mentioned, there's something that will be launched on October 30, 2025. Where are we in terms of implementing eCourt PH?
Thank you. First and foremost, we have started the registration of lawyers through our Philippine Judiciary platform. So far, we have registered almost more than 12,000 lawyers into the platform. And we have tested the court management app at the trial court level with 9 pilot courts. And because of the output coming from the comments of all the staff that have been participating, we have already created the terms of reference, and we are about to engage in the procurement of the court management app using the new procurement law. And soon enough, we will roll out the court management app to all the trial courts at the first and second level. The court management app contains not only a dashboard for each of the employees, so there is a different dashboard for the judge, different from the clerk of court, from the docket management clerk. It also has a docket management system that can flag to the judge whether there are motions that need to be decided immediately. And we also have a digitalization process and a way to link video conferencing. The calendars of all courts are going to be made public. In other words, you can see the court calendar of the Regional Trial Court of Bongao, Tawi-Tawi, once we have rolled this out. We are engaging the regional court managers to train all our judges as we roll out this project. And we are now hiring tech support, so MISO personnel at all the regions. But we are going to install technical assistance officers at all the branches that will provide tech support level 0. We are not going to hire new staff. We are going to upskill staff at the branch Those that are supposed to be redundant because of digitalization, upon instructions of the chief, we are doing human transformation and making sure that change management happens. Next, I'd like to say that in the Supreme Court, the filing now, the original filing is now fully digital by October 30. No longer will we receive paper copies. It is now all digital, and the hybrid period, meaning to say digital and paper, will now end in October. I also want to report that we have already e-Rollos for almost all the pending cases in the Supreme Court. Also, that by October 30, Sandigan Bayan will launch its own e-court connected to the platform. November, the back office of CTA will be compliant with the Philippine Judiciary Platform. End of November, by December, the Court of Appeals will also launch its own eCourt PH connected to the Philippine Judiciary Platform. We are hoping that by June or July next year, that we have substantially rolled out to all the trial courts in the country, the court management apps, and therefore the filings now will be done through the platform rather than simply through email. The judiciary platform can also act as a management system for law firms and lawyers, because they will see all the cases that they have filed, and they will be receiving, as soon as it is filed, instantaneously the pleadings and the motions and the orders that are going to be promulgated. Artificial intelligence. We have rolled out, and almost all our stenographers are now using Scriptix. It's a voice-to-text program that facilitates the creation of a transcript of stenographic notes. We are hoping to upgrade with live transcription and then later live translation, so that as the litigants, as the lawyers are conducting the proceedings in English, there will be a closed captioning system in the screens that will be installed in all courts so that the public will be very aware. We are thankful to the government of Spain and the International Cooperation Agency, because we are continuing with Digital Calesa. And last week, we were just there sharing inputs regarding how AI is regulated in the European Union. And we'd like to announce that we are far ahead in terms of drafting the governance framework for artificial intelligence, for the deployment of artificial intelligence in the judiciary. And hopefully, with the bank's support, we will be the first in the country that will actually have a governance framework for the use of artificial intelligence. We also want to thank profusely COICA through the embassy and the ambassador of Korea to the Philippines, because they are giving a substantial grant for purposes of digitalization of all the court records in the entire country, as well as consulting services for our eCourt PH program. Of course, GoJust and Fair Justice have been assisting in many aspects of the program. I also want to announce that in terms of our Real Justice, identifying geographically marginalized areas so that we can continue with an upgrade of EJAW, Enhanced Judicial Justice on Wheels. We will do what we did in Tawi-Tawi in many places in our country, so that it is the court personnel that goes to the litigants rather than the litigants going to courts in very geographically challenged areas, across seas, in mountains, etc. There is more, and I hope I did not miss out on some of them. But I also want to say that the entire court is actually involved. Not only the e-court, the computerization committee, but all the justices of the Supreme Court have been assisting in supervising how regions are doing their e-court PH. And for this purpose, the chief and some of the justices have reached as far as Jolo, Tawi-Tawi, maybe soon, with the chief's permission, maybe even Batanes, in order to see that this entire project is ongoing. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Sir Leonen. Of course, the goal of adopting technological tools is to drive home efficiency, to make the courts more responsive and efficient. But how else can we improve the performance of the courts? There's actually a committee within the Supreme Court, SC Committee on First Level and Second Level Courts Performance Evaluation, who does this, and they're in charge of the high performance courts. And we have with us the Vice Chairperson, Justice Antonio Tico Jr., to talk to us about what are the plans for high performance courts.
The high performance court mandate is to enhance judicial efficiency, which is one of the basic objectives of the strategic plan for judicial innovation. The objective to increase efficiency under the SPJI is twofold. One is through more streamlined court systems based on the needs of internal and external stakeholders. When you speak of the internal stakeholders, we refer to court employees. When you speak of external stakeholders, we talk of the court users, such as litigants, lawyers, and etc. The other is through effective monitoring of performances of the first and second level courts as an institution. The intended byproduct of this program or this project is to produce what is called the playbook for high performance courts. In order to produce this playbook, which shall contain the best practices of high performance courts, the committee, together with the EU Governance on Justice, the EU GOJAS, developed the Performance Development Framework. The PDF is a tool that tracks a court's performance and identifies ways to improve the same. The PDF contains what is called the key performance indicators, grouped into 4 quadrants, each representing factors that significantly influence court performance. What are these 4 quadrants? The first quadrant refers to the internal process, and it has 4 subtopics. We have case disposal rate, we have case clearance rate, the on-time processing of criminal and civil cases, and the case duration. These are the performance indicators for the first quadrant. For the second quadrant, it refers to the decision-making quality of judges and courts. And the factor to determine here is what is called the decision confirmation rate. The third quadrant speaks of the external stakeholders. As I mentioned earlier, this refers to the court users, the litigants, and the lawyers. We ask them to submit what is called as court user satisfaction. So they will rate the court on how satisfied services are being given to external stakeholders. The last one, the fourth quadrant, refers to the internal stakeholders, the employees, the court employees. And in order to get their feedback, we measure it through employees' engagements, and number 2, employees' net promoter score. Now, we should not consider this high performance courts rating as a tool for competition, ranking, or punishment. It is not. The ultimate goal of the high performance court is to assist the courts in improving their performance towards becoming high performance courts. And what is the process now? What is the status of the committee's work? Moving forward, we will conduct coaching sessions among the committee members, consultants, and pilot courts to strengthen the implementation, support, and to help courts improve based on the data we have gathered. We also look forward to the 2026 launch of the evaluation report, which will feature the data analysis conducted by our expert consultants alongside with the playbook. Finally, we aim for an expanded implementation of the performance development framework across more first-level courts and also expand to the second-level courts in 2026, bringing us closer to institutionalizing performance-driven court management nationwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Go. Now, apart from efficiency, the courts is also taking steps to be more inclusive, to reach more court users. And one of these projects is the use of Filipino Sign Language in courts. And let me now call on Justice Marquez again. He is the Vice Chairperson of the TWG to draft the rules on Filipino Sign Language. Where are we in terms of drafting the rules, Justice?
The committee has already finalized the draft rules and in fact has submitted it already to the court and bank for approval, I think, a week or two ago. No? So it's now under consideration of the court and bank, and we're hoping that the court and bank will be able to approve the draft rules within the year. And hopefully, again, by first quarter of 2026, we will be able to officially launch the rules at the session hall of the court. No? Incidentally, just for the information of everyone, the FSL has its own grammar and structure, completely different from English or Filipino or any spoken language. But it has no written form. It is purely visual and spatial. So when we are able to launch this, hopefully in the first quarter of 2026, we will now conduct information drives and court visits across selected cities in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao to disseminate the rules and engage in dialogues on their implementation.
Great. Thank you, Justice Maidas. And still on inclusivity, you also have the Unified Legal Aid Service that the Supreme Court is rolling out. So let's check what's the status of this and what are the steps moving forward. Let me call on, again, Justice Rodil Zalameda, who is the Vice Chairperson of the TWG that drafted the ULAS rules. Justice Rodil.
This is really the baby of Justice Benamin Kagiwa and the chairperson of the ULAS rules. Well, the ULAS rules is consistent with SPJI's guiding principle and would provide underprivileged Filipinos with an enhanced access to justice. Background of the ULAS rules. There were two iterations before of the legal aid service, but both of them failed. This was the MLAS and the CLAS. And the feedback from the public will be the basis of the ULAS rules to be enacted and promulgated, issued by the TWG. Among the concerns raised on the MLAS and the CLAS is that the quality of legal services rendered by CLAS, because it was imposed only on new bar passers with limited experience. That's why yung mga underprivileged ay nagsasabi na mga bagong abogado to, kulang pa yung practice nila and experience to defend them in court. Secondly, the former legal aid services were limited only to litigation, not like the ULAS right now, which covers the whole gamut of the practice of law, including giving advices, contract drafting, and rendering opinions to the underprivileged. Now, another cause of the failure of the previous legal aid services were the support manpower, the lack of support from the staff, and the physical access to the IBP. Now, on August 20, 2024, the ULAS rules were promulgated. Under the ULAS rules, qualified beneficiaries and indigents can engage in any form of the practice of law, and this will be regarded as legal aid service. The ULAS Interim Board also, which is tasked to ensure the smooth implementation of the ULAS rules, was constituted with Associate Justice Benamin Kagiwa as the chairperson. On April 28, 2025, the ULAS Rules Manual was passed by the Court and Bank. And together with the ULAS Rules Manual was the creation of an ULAS office. This is in the building of the IBP in Pasig City, Ortigas. And the ULAS office already has an Assistant Executive Officer, Attorney Ria Berbano Ablan, whose function is akin to that of a vice president. Also, the ULA's office workplace will be made permanent maybe by the first quarter of next year. The implementation of the ULA's rules and manual continues to gain momentum, and the interim board conducted its strategic plan workshop to set the direction of the ULA's, and resulting to the advisory issuance, advisory number 1 and advisory number 2, which is about the accreditation of legal aid programs conducted by the IBP, the Department of Justice Action Center, and law school legal aid clinics. One important accomplishment of the ULA's right now is the ULA's portal, which is the centralized digital platform that will be used for the implementation and monitoring of compliance with the ULA's rules, to keep track of the hours of work or rendered legal service by our covered lawyers. Well, one of the problems that caused the failure of the previous iterations of the legal aid services were the problem in communication. So we have now the ULA's communication plan. The ULA's microsite has been updated to include ULA's rules manual, 2 sets of frequently asked questions, to guide compliance and address common questions on the legal aid availability, compliance periods, creditable service, registration, and accreditation procedures for all lawyers. Also, we have a dedicated ULA's help desk email. So the people and the lawyers, stakeholders can inquire on recurring questions about the ULA's to develop future communication plans, provide updates to the microsite. Also, ULA's conducted a training of trainers, and 30 volunteer lawyers from various IBP chapters served as advocate and communicators to disseminate the program of ULA's to several regions. In fact, there were regional orientations rolled out in Pasig, in Iloilo City with about 200 participants each. And then next orientations will be set in Naga City, Lawag City, and Bicol, and the Barm in Mindanao, strengthening international linkages. The Pro Bono Institute in Washington, D.C. recently featured ULA's in its publication, Mandatory Pro Bono in the Philippines, because this is the first time that a legal aid service was initiated coming from the judiciary. So we were recognized here in Washington, D.C. By the end of 2025, we aim to ensure that the 3 regular ULA's board members from private practice are appointed by the court and bank so they can assume office by January 1, 2026 and immediately begin discharging their functions. The fit-out office, permanent ULA's office of the IBP Tower in Ortigas, is also targeted for completion within the first quarter of 2026. Further, the ULA's Secretariat, ULA's office personnel, with the help of our development partners, the Asia Foundation and Fair Justice Program, thank you, will continue implementing the communications plan, including the production of infographics and explainer video, to raise awareness among covered lawyers and the public about ULA's and its objectives. Finally, springing from the growing global recognition of ULA's as one of the world's first judiciary-led mandatory pro bono frameworks, we also aim to deepen engagement with other jurisdictions and gain comparative insight to further refine the implementation of ULA's.
Access to justice goes beyond opening courtroom doors. It means ensuring that every person who seeks justice and those who deliver it are supported by a system that is fair, inclusive, and worthy of public trust. Through reforms that uphold accountability, inclusivity, well-being, and collaboration, the judiciary continues to expand the true meaning of access to justice for all. The Judicial Integrity Office, created on March 4, 2025, strengthens internal accountability by receiving and investigating complaints, proposing sanctions, and enforcing ethical standards at all levels of the judiciary. Alongside this, the court will soon roll out the updated ethics codes to ensure integrity in the digital age, addressing the responsible use of AI, social media, and gender-fair language. A gender-responsive judiciary continues to take root through gender sensitivity training and the nationwide rollout of guidelines on inclusive and respectful use of language and courtroom practice. The Committee on Family Courts and Juvenile Concerns advances reforms that protect children and families in crisis, from family mediation and updated judicial forms to partnerships that combat trafficking and strengthen child protection. Recognizing that justice also depends on those who serve, the Mental Health Program provides care for judges and court personnel through regional mental health units, self-assessment tools, and mental health summits across the country. And through the Justice Sector Coordinating Council, collaboration among the Supreme Court, DOJ, and DILG has expanded justice zones to 16 nationwide, fostering innovation in criminal justice reform and strengthening coordination across the justice sector.
Let me throw the first question to Justice Ko, Antonio Tico Jr. He penned the resolution which approved the creation of the Judicial Integrity Office from the JIB. What was the reason for the change, Justice Ko, and what does this mean?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Before the reorganization of the JIO, there was many concerns, complaints by the members of the judiciary that were facing complaints or cases against them. And most of these cases work to their disadvantage in the sense that promotions are being held. Hindi sila pwede ma-promote because there's a pending criminal or pending administrative case against them. So to address this concern, the Supreme Court through the SPJI decided to reorganize the JIB and thus created what is known as the Judicial Integrity Office. Now, what are the features of this new JIO? Number one is the streamlined disciplinary process. The JIO will have an authority to directly receive administrative complaints, eliminating unnecessary delays by ensuring all complaints are referred to it for evaluation. Additionally, the JIO can initiate complaints independently or through referrals from other oversight bodies. Number two, enhanced investigatory powers. The JIO, replacing the collective board of the former Judicial Integrity Board, will have the authority to conduct fact-finding investigations. These include the ability to issue subpoenas for witnesses and documents, as well as the power to recommend preventive suspensions during investigation. The third one is expanded accountability and coverage. The JIO's mandate now includes all levels of judges, first, second, appellate, and special courts, as well as officials and employees within the courts and offices supervised by the Supreme Court. And lastly, number four, faster case resolution and reduce backlog. With a simplified procedure, having a single judicial integrity officer instead of a board, and direct processing of complaints, it is anticipated that delay in the resolution of the cases will diminish. In fact, a mandatory grievance conference will be introduced for minor offenses prior to docketing to expedite the resolution of lighter cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Ko. And of course, the goal of the Judicial Integrity Office is we want judges and justices to be upright and role models, but we also want court personnel to be gender sensitive. And so in this regard, there are gender sensitivity trainings that are conducted all over the country. And if I may ask, Justice Jolo Lopez, Josep Lopez is the chair, co-chair of the committee, CGRJ. How were these gender sensitivity trainings received all over the country?
From what we have seen in our trainings from Baguio, Bicol, Bohol, and lately in Subic, it's clear that gender sensitivity training is still urgently needed. In fact, in Subic, last week, one utility worker shared that in his 35 years in the judiciary, the training was the very first training he had ever attended. That really tells us a lot. It reminds us that our frontliners also want to learn and that these sessions make them feel seen and valued. Many participants even thank our facilitators, saying that it was the very first time that someone explained to them these things clearly. For us, this is no longer just an educational activity, it is more importantly a means of empowering our own people. That's why we need to engage with our trial court employees more and more. Maraming salamat, Attorney Mike.
Thank you, Justice Josep Lopez. If I may just mention, the other co-chairs of the Committee on Gender Responsiveness in the Judiciary are Associate Justice Henry Jean Paul Biinting and Associate Justice Maria Filomena Dising. Now, Justice Josep Lopez also sits as co-chairperson of the Committee on Family Courts and Juvenile Concerns, along with Associate Justice Ami C. Lazaro Javier. And Justice, you've just successfully finished your 6th National Family Court Summit. What are our plans with respect to family and juvenile concerns?
Now, here are just a few of the initiatives of the Committee on Family Courts and Juvenile Concerns to look forward to. For family mediation, which was received positively by our judges in the 6th National Family Court Summit, as mentioned by Attorney Mike, we will further conduct subsequent batches of training and learning from our assessment of the first batch. We will continue to engage in capacity building initiatives on combating trafficking in persons and online sexual abuse and exploitation of children. Also in the works are the following rules and guidelines: recognition of foreign divorce, revised rules on examination of a child witness, and proposed guidelines in fixing child support. We look forward to the assistance and continued support of the court and our development partners in realizing these many goals. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Justice Josep Lopez. And last but not the least, you also look at the mental health and mental well-being of everyone in court, and we wouldn't be one of the top 10 best employers in the Philippines without this. Let me call on Associate Justice Ricardo Rosario, who is one of the 2 chairpersons of the Supreme Court Governing Council for Mental Health, the other one being the Chief Justice. So, Justice Ricky, where are we in terms of taking care of the mental well-being of our personnel, and what are the plans moving forward?
As most of us know, the Supreme Court organized the Mental Health Committee to prevent mental health issues from affecting employees of the judiciary, especially so as their duties entail much pressure and stress. One of the priorities of the Council, we have a Supreme Court Governing Council for Mental Health. I'm a member of that council, and one priority is to continue our efforts in bringing mental health to the forefront of the discussions across the entire judiciary. Now, consistent with this objective, the Council has prepared for the Mental Health Summit. This summit will coincide with the launching of the Regional Mental Health Unit in Butuan City. I think that's Judicial Region number 10. And once we are done with that, we will be doing the same thing, meaning we will bring these initiatives to the remaining judicial regions. In addition, Attorney Mike, we will continue delivering mental health support directly to the members of the judiciary. As you may, I think you were present during the successful launch or launching of the Judicial Burnout Scale mobile application, Attorney Mike. This was designed or intended for these first and second level court judges. But at present, we are now working on a similar application, which this time is designed specifically for court personnel. So, hindi na to limited lang sa mga judges. Now, it is our hope that aside from detecting warning signs of burnout or mental fatigue, these applications will guide the court in creating even more mental health policy reforms and programs moving forward. Thank you.
And here's Tiff Atendido Beltran, Supreme Court Information Officer, for this week's updates.
From the Supreme Court of the Philippines, here's the latest. The Supreme Court en banc on Tuesday, November 4, 2025, issued a status quo ante-order in the case filed by Susan Areno Yap Sulit challenging the COMELEC resolution dated October 22, 2025, which disqualified her as mayor of Tarlac City. The status quo ante-order restores the situation of the parties prior to the issuance of the COMELEC en banc resolution disqualifying Yap Sulit, while the Supreme Court resolves the case. The SC also directed the respondents to file their comment on the petition within 10 days. Amado de Leon and J.R. Capulong Navarro had sought to disqualify Yap Sulit for allegedly not meeting the one-year residency requirement in Tarlac City before the 2025 elections. The COMELEC's second division earlier dismissed the petition, allowing Yap Sulit to run and be proclaimed as Tarlac City mayor. However, on October 22, 2025, the COMELEC en banc reversed the second division's ruling and ordered her disqualification, prompting Yap Sulit to elevate the case to the SC. Chief Justice Alexander Esmundo on Tuesday administered the oath of office to the newly appointed Associate Justices of the Court of Appeals and Sandigan Bayan at the Supreme Court Session Hall in Manila. Taking their oaths were CA Associate Justices Robert Victor Marcon and Snooki Maria Ana Sagayo, and Sandigan Bayan Associate Justices Fritz Bryn Anthony de los Santos and Hans Chester Nocom, who were appointed on September 23, 2025. The ceremony was attended by SC Senior Associate Justice Marvic M.B.F. Leonin and Associate Justices Alfredo Benjamin Caguiwa, Ramon Paul Hernando, Henry John Paul Inting, Rodil Zalameda, Samuel Garlan, Japar de Maampao, Jose Mayras Marquez, and Raul Villanueva. Chief Justice Esmundo welcomed the new members of the judiciary's higher ranks, emphasizing the vital role they will play in upholding the rule of law, promoting justice, and strengthening public trust in the courts. The Supreme Court has upheld the disallowance of funds intended for socio-economic programs of Surigao del Norte's Mamanwa tribes, but were instead used by the Regional Office of the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, or NCIP, for its operating expenses. In a decision written by Associate Justice Mario Lopez before his retirement, the SC en banc upheld the disallowances, stressing that trust funds held by any government agency must be spent only for the specific purpose for which the trust was created, as provided under Presidential Decree No. 1445 or the Government Auditing Code of the Philippines. In upholding the disallowances, the SC said that the financial assistance constitutes a trust fund, as expressly stated in the Memorandum of Agreement. The disbursements came from a trust account created exclusively for socio-economic projects benefiting the IPs or ICCs of Surigao del Norte. Therefore, using the funds for NCIP Region 13's operating expenses, such as rent, equipment purchases, maintenance, communication, and supplies, violated the law. The Supreme Court has ruled that a candidate's low vote count in past elections does not automatically make them a nuisance candidate in future elections. In a decision written by Chief Justice Alexander Esmundo, the SC en banc annulled the November 29, 2024 resolutions of the COMELEC, which canceled the certificate of candidacy of Zubair Ginto Mustafa in the 2025 senatorial elections. The COMELEC Law Department moved to declare him a nuisance candidate, arguing that his candidacy was primarily a distraction, especially since he received only 5,387 votes, or just 2.01% of the total votes for the Lanao del Sur representative seat in the 2022 elections. The SC warned that if the COMELEC could declare someone a nuisance candidate simply because of low votes in past elections or perceived inability to win, it would be exercising a power reserved for voters on election day. The SC noted Mustafa submitted evidence to show his genuine intent, such as his membership in the Workers' and Peasants' Party, a recognized and accredited national political party with various policies on labor and other social justice causes. While the SC recognized the efforts of the COMELEC to weed out nuisance candidates, it reminded the poll body to exercise caution and avoid using grounds already ruled as invalid by the court, such as lack of financial capacity to mount a national campaign or perceived unpopularity. You are now up to date with the Philippine Supreme Court. I am Tiffany Doblatran, Supreme Court Information Officer.
And that's our podcast this week. Join us again next time for a detailed discussion of select court initiatives and cases decided by the Supreme Court. I'm Attorney Mike Navalio, your Supreme Court Chief Communications Officer. You can catch this podcast as well as previous episodes on the Supreme Court website and the Supreme Court Public Information Office's accounts on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify.